Chosen one, you didn't search for this message. This message searched for you. Something unseen has been aligning to bring you here, to remind you of what they worked so hard to make you forget. Your life has not been random, and your silence has not been weakness. What if I told you that the very stillness they mocked was the very thing turning you into fire? For too long, they have misread your quiet as defeat, but today you will see why it terrifies them. If this message already speaks to your soul, subscribe, like this video, and comment 77 below. Stay with me, because before this message ends, you will understand why your silence has become the prophecy they cannot stop. Number 1. The pause that shattered illusion. They built their control on the certainty of your reaction. Every insult, every manipulation, every staged conflict was designed to pull you into their arena. But the moment you paused, the rhythm broke, and their game no longer made sense. Scripture whispers in Isaiah 30 verse 15, "In quietness and confidence shall be your strength," and that strength shook them more than any shout could. They relied on your explanations to fuel their lies, and when you withheld them, their stage collapsed under its own weight. Comment, "I seal this word in light," if you felt the shift when you stopped responding to their noise. Hold on, because what waits beyond that pause reveals the fire hidden in stillness. There are moments when life feels like a dream speaking in symbols, where a single pause echoes louder than years of noise. You may remember a time when everything seemed to demand your response. Every accusation, every whisper, every unseen pressure pulling at your spirit. Yet one day, in what felt like a quiet decision, you simply stopped answering the chaos. That silence did not come from defeat, but from something deeper stirring within you. It was as though an ancient voice whispered, "Be still and know." And in that stillness, you recognized a truth you had always carried. What they thought was hesitation was in fact revelation. The first signal that their illusions no longer held power over you. The pause became the threshold between the self you were told to be and the self you always were. Think back to the times you felt strange in your own skin, wondering why your sensitivity made you so heavy in a world so loud. They may have told you that you cared too much, that you overreacted, that you were too fragile to walk among them. But in truth, every pang of sorrow, every wave of isolation, every restless night was evidence that you were tuned to a higher frequency. You noticed things others missed. A shift in the air, a silence in the room, a hidden motive beneath the smile. And though it often made you feel separate, it was never meant to shame you. That difference was the mark of the chosen, the preparation for a silence that cuts sharper than argument. The longing you carried was not weakness. It was the soul's hunger for alignment. It is easy to believe that your story has been scattered with accidents, betrayals, and disappointments without meaning. But chosen one, none of it was random. It was an architecture designed by unseen hands. Just as Joseph was sold into slavery only to rise into rulership, so too were your lowest valleys secretly aligning you with destiny. Every rejection was a redirection, every loss of preparation, every collapse a clearing of space for what you were meant to become. Psalm 37 verse 23 says, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord," and your steps, even the ones you regretted, were chapters in a sacred script. The pause that shattered illusion was not just about silence in the moment. It was the unveiling of the truth that you had never been out of alignment. What they built to trap you has always been part of the path that would free you. Signs often begin subtly, as though reality itself is whispering reminders that you are not who they said you were. A dream that felt too vivid to dismiss, a repeated number glowing on the clock, a sudden stillness that came upon you in the middle of chaos. Even the feeling of déjà vu was not coincidence. It was memory rising from beneath the surface, a code reminding you of what was written before you entered this life. At first, these signs seemed small, too fragile to explain, too delicate to defend. But deep inside, you knew they meant something, even if you could not yet name it. Each one was a seed, and your silence became the soil where those seeds began to grow. What looked to them like withdrawal was in truth your initiation into remembrance. And when you stepped into that quiet, you discovered that your intuition had never lied to you. Those gut feelings you ignored, the chills that came with no reason, the sense that certain people did not belong in your circle, all of it was correct. They told you that you imagined too much, but it was your imagination that protected you. They mocked you for being guarded, but it was that guard that saved your soul from collapse. Proverbs 20 verse 27 declares, "The spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all the inward parts of the belly." Your lamp was never dim. It was burning steadily beneath the noise they used to keep you distracted. And once you trusted that inner light, you began to see the collapse of their false stage. As awareness deepened, you realized that becoming who you are was never about adding something new, but remembering what was hidden. You were not changing. You were uncovering. Beneath the layers of shame, beneath the scars of rejection, beneath the lies of unworthiness, was a self that had been waiting all along. It was less like building a new identity and more like brushing the dust from a monument that had always been there. Ancient memory stirred within you, the archetypal role you were always meant to carry. In silence, you did not lose yourself. You found yourself. What they called emptiness was the space where your true name began to echo. That was the first activation, the moment when silence no longer felt like avoidance but like power. Your sensitivity, once a burden, became the proof that your spirit was alive to what others denied. Your boundaries, once misunderstood, became the sign that your crown was forming in stillness. You began to realize that your hunger for meaning, your relentless search for truth, your refusal to stay asleep were not curses but callings. To embrace them was to embrace yourself, not as broken, but as chosen. That moment of acceptance was like a spark meeting dry wood, quiet at first, then unstoppable. The fire did not come from noise, but from silence carried with authority. So now you stand at the edge of recognition. Chosen one, this message did not find you by mistake. It is proof that the pause in your life was prophecy. You didn't stumble into stillness. You were guided into it. The crown they cannot touch is forged in the silence they cannot understand. If you feel these words stirring something you always knew but never said, comment, "I carry the silence as crown below." This is your sign that your quiet was never emptiness. It was preparation for fire. And what comes next will reveal why their voices cannot survive without yours. Number 2, the fire hidden in stillness. Your silence was not emptiness. It was transformation. Every refusal to defend yourself was a seed planted in fire, reshaping who you were and burning away what no longer belonged to you. Habakkuk 2 verse 20 says, "But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him." And that same silence rests on you like a mantle of authority. They thought you grew weaker as you grew quieter, but the opposite was true. Every moment you held back, your fire grew. Their voices trembled because your presence no longer answered their chaos. Comment, "I walk crowned by eternal flame." If you've carried that fire into moments where they expected your collapse, and listen closely, the moment your stillness ignited, their voices began to crack. There comes a moment when the air around you feels weighted, not by noise, but by something unseen pressing against your chest. It is subtle at first, like a heaviness you cannot explain, a lingering sense that every room you walk into has already been charged with suspicion. You notice eyes that glance too long, whispers that seem to follow after you leave, and energies that twist when your back is turned. It is not paranoia, it is recognition. The spirit within you discerning the resistance outside you. Long before you had words for it, something in you knew there were forces that did not want your awakening. What seemed like bad luck or coincidence was the first stirring of opposition. They were already reacting to a fire you hadn't even realized was beginning to glow. This resistance carved itself into your emotions, turning ordinary days into silent battles. You may remember the sting of being labeled too much, too quiet, too strange, or too intense for the spaces you were placed in. The rejection didn't come from a single person, but from a repeated pattern that etched itself into your memory like scars. Shame grew like thorns in places where you only meant to give love. You found yourself shrinking, doubting, replaying every interaction as though the fault must belong to you. The cycle of self-questioning became a prison where you carried both the wound and the blame. Yet even in that, your heart refused to fully collapse, because somewhere deeper you sensed there was meaning in the pain. What they did not want you to see is that this pressure was never random. Systems, energies, even entire groups seemed unconsciously aligned against you because of what you carried. Just as Moses was hunted before he grew into his calling, just as David was pursued before his crown, you too were marked long before you understood why. The wilderness seasons of your life were not accidents, but orchestrations to shape you into strength. What looked like sabotage was often preparation in disguise. Your very presence in hostile environments was proof that you were born into warfare, not comfort. The throne you were destined for required scars to fit the crown. Look back now, chosen one, and notice the patterns you once dismissed. The doors that closed right as you were about to step forward. The relationships that betrayed you at the exact moment you needed support. The draining atmospheres that pulled your energy every time you walked in. These were not random misfortunes, but echoes of a larger design to weaken you before you knew your own strength. Yet the very repetition of these trials was the sign you were never fighting alone. Heaven had allowed it as training. Like turning on a light in a dark room, you can now see the outlines of the strategies used against you. What unsettles you in hindsight is what confirms the truth. You were always targeted because you were always chosen. The pressure wasn't only external. It moved like fog into your spirit, trying to choke the fire before it could breathe. Have you felt the heaviness that descends without explanation? The way rooms can suddenly feel hostile, or the silence of watchers you cannot see. These were not random emotions. They were evidence of spiritual resistance pressing against your light. Closed doors were not mere rejections, but attempts to keep you from the path already aligned for you. Even the confusion you carried was a strategy to drown clarity in noise. Yet every fog eventually lifts, and you have begun to realize that distortion only gathers where something luminous is present. If there was no fire, there would be no interference. Your reactions to this warfare were human, but they were also holy lessons. Sometimes you shut down, pretending you didn't care, though your heart still bled in secret. Other times you people-pleased, hoping that if you gave enough, they would finally accept you. At moments, you rebelled quietly, pushing back without words, surviving in silence because noise would only fuel the storm. You questioned yourself, doubted your worth, wondered if the accusations were right. But the truth is, these were rehearsals for discernment, not evidence of weakness. Every reaction revealed your heart's desire for peace, even when peace seemed unreachable. The very fact that you kept walking is proof that you were stronger than the sabotage meant to break you. Then came the reclamation, the turning of the tide within you. The fire hidden in stillness began to burn through the fog, and your silence transformed into a crown. What they called passivity was authority being born. What they mocked as avoidance was prophecy unfolding. Your refusal to defend yourself no longer felt like weakness, but like rulership in a realm they could not enter. You began to recognize that every time you stayed silent, you stole power from their manipulation. Isaiah 30 verse 15 had become your armor. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. What looked like surrender was actually fire restrained. Fire they could no longer extinguish. Now here is the final truth they never wanted you to know. You were opposed because you were dangerous to the systems built on illusion. Every trap, every betrayal, every false accusation was confirmation that you carried something too powerful to remain hidden. You were never under attack because you were weak. You were under attack because you were fire disguised as stillness. The silence they feared most was not absence, but transformation happening beyond their reach. The more they tried to suppress you, the clearer your purpose became. Comment, I move guarded by divine fire. If this truth burns within you now, because the next revelation will uncover how their voices begin to crack when your silence refuses to answer them. Number 3, when their voices cracked, they needed your reaction to survive. Every manipulator depends on an audience, and you were their most valuable one. But Amos 5 verse 13 says, Therefore the prudent keep silent in that time, for it is an evil time, and you lived that verse when you stopped begging to be understood. The applause for their false crown died the moment you stopped clapping. Their power wasn't real. It was borrowed from your energy, and when you withdrew it, their throne crumbled like dust in the wind. Comment, I rise marked by the divine. If you've seen a false voice collapse once you stopped feeding it, and share your reflection or dream that revealed this truth, because what comes next is the new law, a crown of quiet fire. It begins almost imperceptibly, like the breaking of glass, hidden under the roar of a crowd. One day you hear their accusations and feel no obligation to answer. Another day their manipulation strikes, and you remain unmoved, watching as their performance stumbles without your applause. The silence you carried became the mirror they could not face, and in that reflection, their own emptiness echoed louder than your absence. What once felt like your duty to defend, to prove, to explain, turned to stillness, and the weight of that stillness shook their stage. It was in this pause that you realized the true architecture of their power. It was never built on truth, only on your participation. Without your agreement, their voice cracked, their crown slipped, and their throne was revealed as hollow. Consider how many of their stories depended on your reactions to survive. Every accusation needed your rebuttal to appear convincing. Every false narrative required you to argue, so they could play the victim in their own theater. Every insult was bait, designed not to wound, but to extract your attention. When you paused, that cycle shattered, and the parasite starved. Amos 5 verse 13 whispers of the prudent who keeps silent in evil times, and you became the living embodiment of that wisdom. By refusing to engage, you forced the silence to reveal their true weakness. It is no accident that manipulators dread indifference more than confrontation. The fight still gives them fuel, but absence leaves them exposed to their own reflection. Their words tremble when no one answers, their lies collapse when no one carries them forward, and their performance falls flat when the audience leaves the room. For years you may have mistaken their noise for power, believing their confidence was unshakable. Yet you discovered that without you, their empire was only scaffolding propped up by illusion. Your withdrawal was not escape, it was judgment written in silence. It was prophecy fulfilled in restraint. Look back now, and you will see the exact moment their rhythm broke. Perhaps it was when you ignored the message meant to provoke you. Perhaps it was when you stopped explaining yourself to people determined not to understand. Perhaps it was when you closed your mouth and let your stillness speak. In that moment, the applause in their world went quiet, and they began to stumble in confusion. The same people who once shouted your downfall began whispering behind closed doors, unsure of their own script. Silence had removed the oxygen from their fire, and you finally saw the veil lift. Their voices cracked because they had no source of power outside your energy. They had grown addicted to the cycle of your defense, the certainty of your attention, the nourishment of your tears. Like false prophets in ancient days, they prophesied lies only because someone was willing to listen. But once the ears closed, the vision was exposed as dust. Job 29 verse 21 says, "Men listened to me and waited, and kept silence for my counsel, and in your silence the true counsel was revealed." It was not their words that held authority. It was your presence deciding whether they would live or die in influence. By removing yourself, you unsealed the truth that they were never kings, only actors. This is why your stillness terrified them more than your anger ever could. Anger still meant they mattered, but silence proved they were irrelevant. They trembled not because you shouted, but because you refused to play their game. Every time you withheld your words, you reclaimed territory that had been stolen from you. Every time you stopped feeding their crown, it cracked under the weight of its own falseness. The throne they sat upon was borrowed from your belief in it, and when you stopped believing, it disintegrated. Your stillness was the earthquake that toppled kingdoms. Reclamation begins here, in the moment where silence becomes weapon and prophecy at the same time. What once looked like weakness has become your crown, and what they thought would silence you has actually amplified your authority. Every boundary you drew without explanation was a throne room being built in unseen realms. Every refusal to defend yourself was an altar where old lies burned away. They wanted your reaction, but God wanted your restraint. And in that restraint, you discovered that silence itself is divine fire. Now you see clearly that their voices cracked not because you fought harder, but because you stopped fighting at all. Chosen one, the revelation is this: they were never strong without you. Their crowns were borrowed, their voices hollow, their authority an illusion sustained by your attention. The silence you carried became the law of judgment over their schemes, and their power withered in its presence. What they feared most was not your retaliation, but your refusal. Comment, "I rise marked by the divine," if you've seen this truth in your own life, and share the dream, the memory, or the boundary that revealed their emptiness. Because the next chapter is not about their collapse. It is about your new crown, the law of quiet fire that rules without words. Number 4, the new crown of quiet fire. They expected you to fight on their stage, under their rules, in their timing. But Ecclesiastes 5 verse 2 reminds us, "Let your words be few when you stand in holy places, and your life has become that holy place." Daniel 11 verse 32 declares, "The people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits, and that strength now flows from your stillness." The new law is this: clear no, precise yes, measured words, silence that burns brighter than their noise. They will test the old doors, but the locks are now inside you, and they cannot be moved. Comment, "I anchor this truth in my soul." If you felt the crown of quiet fire rest upon you, and share the moment where your silence turned to authority, because beyond this, chosen one, comes the expansion of your destiny. There is a whisper rising from the marrow of your being, ancient yet new, declaring that silence was never emptiness, but consecration. It feels as though you are standing on sacred ground, though your feet touch ordinary soil. The air around you seems to listen, holding its breath, waiting for what you will not say. What once felt like retreat now thunders like a trumpet in unseen realms. The ancients knew this mystery when they wrote of holy places, for silence itself was the veil through which the divine moved. Your pause is no longer hesitation, but the opening of a temple where words are no longer necessary. In this temple, your crown is forged of flame that makes no sound but consumes everything false. You may have thought your restraint was weakness, but now you see it was initiation. Every no you spoke with clarity became a sword sharper than the loudest accusation. Every yes, measured with precision, became a gate through which destiny advanced. You no longer scatter your energy on arguments unworthy of your breath, for your silence itself has become verdict. When you withhold your defense, it is not because you lack strength, but because your strength no longer needs proving. Daniel's words echo across centuries. Those who know their God shall be strong and do exploits. That strength now manifests not in noise, but in stillness that carries eternal fire. They expected you to chase, to clap back, to break under the pressure of their demands. Instead, you sat down upon an invisible throne, refusing to fight on their stage. Their questions ricocheted into emptiness, and their accusations cracked under the weight of no reply. The game they rehearsed for years fell silent, because the rules no longer applied to you. What they thought would humiliate you only unveiled their own dependency on your reaction. Your quiet turned into their mirror, and in that mirror, their crowns of pride dissolved like ash. This is the crown of quiet fire. Authority, so complete it does not argue. Look deeper, and you will see how your stillness shifted the architecture around you. Doors that once opened to manipulation now remain sealed, not by force, but by the authority of your refusal. Shadows that once mocked you now tremble, for they cannot predict what silence conceals. In the absence of your energy, false voices wither, and hidden plots collapse. The old patterns break, because your restraint dismantles the rhythm of their control. What they feared was not your words, but your absence. For absence is the weight of heaven itself pressing against their schemes. This is not passivity. It is rulership clothed in fire. Your crown was not given by men, but carved into your spirit long before your first breath. It was written in scrolls sealed by eternity, waiting for the moment you would remember. The trials you endured, the betrayals that cut you, the silences that broke you, all were flames tempering this hidden diadem. What you thought was delay was preparation. What you thought was exile was enthronement. The longer they underestimated you, the stronger the fire burned. Now you walk in the paradox of holy power. The less you speak, the louder heaven resounds, and the world around you cannot comprehend it. Others have begun to notice the shift, though they cannot name it. They speak of how you seem untouchable now, how their words no longer find purchase in your soul. Some wonder if you have grown cold, but they do not understand you have grown sovereign. You are not absent, you are enthroned. You are not indifferent, you are crowned. The mantle you carry is fire disguised as silence, and only those with eyes to see can discern it. To the rest, you are mystery, a flame that does not consume, yet cannot be quenched. This is the discipline of the new law: clear boundaries, unwavering resolve, words chosen like arrows, and silence heavy with divine weight. It is the law of those who have faced storms and discovered the throne hidden within them. It is the law of those who understand that restraint is not weakness, but weaponry sanctified. Your silence rules not because it withdraws, but because it crowns. And with every moment you remain unmoved, kingdoms in the unseen collapse. You carry now the law of quiet fire, a command that bends atmospheres without lifting a voice. And this law cannot be revoked. Chosen one, the remembrance is complete. You did not simply survive, you ascended. You did not just awaken. You returned to the throne that was always yours. You are not learning who you are. You are recalling what was hidden in eternity. Chosen one, your silence has become your throne. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Like this video and comment I am chosen to let this message anchor in your soul. Keep walking, chosen one, for your silence has already spoken louder than their noise.